thank you so much, Council, for having us today. For those of you that don't know us, my name is Daria Devlin. I am the Director of Social Impact for the Hammond Health Foundation, also the Executive Director of Build CDC, which is a new entity we'll talk about in a minute. With me today is my colleague Hannah Moran. Hannah is our project manager. And we're here to talk to you today about a community plan, a neighborhood plan that we've developed for the East Avenue neighborhood. We would be seeking approval at a future council meeting of our plan, and so we wanted to come today just for an opportunity to talk with you about it, tell you how we've put it together, what we intend to do with it. So we'll just take some time to go through that if that's okay. Great.
Sounds good.
Okay. So the first document that you have in your packet, there was just a little agenda. You can set that aside. But then we have an overview here. We have it up on the screen as well. So if you kind of go to the first page or follow along on the slides, I want to talk a little bit about how we came to develop this plan. So I think some of you know, in my previous role, I was the executive director of the Erie Center for Arts and Technology. In that position, we renovated the old Wayne School, Ed will remember, at 6th and East Avenue. Wayne was an 80,000 square foot closed building, closed by the Erie School District back in 2017. It sat vacant for 2 years, and then when I was hired as the first executive director of ECAT, we purchased it from the school district and we did a $12 million renovation of that building. We did that with a new market tax credit, which was a federal source that hadn't been used in Erie at the time. We were the first to actually do a new market deal, and were able to bring in the $12 million. It's a little bit of debt and a little bit of equity. And so over the course of 7 years, we're basically paying down the debt that we incurred in order to do that renovation. In doing the renovation, we completely gutted that building down to the bones of it and rebuilt. It is now a wonderful, I think most of you have been there, a wonderful multi-use facility, healthcare, education, and community service. I say all that to say that while we were doing the project, we really, I would say, fell in love with the East Avenue corridor. It was a corridor that I had been familiar with as a kid. I grew up in the Lower East Side, so walking there, I was familiar with it, but really hadn't spent that much time there other than like going to POs when I was a kid. And so when we did the ECAT project, we really began to see the potential on that East Avenue corridor. And what was starting to happen is I would go to the country fair on East Avenue, and people would come up to me and say, "Oh, do you work at that building?" And I'd say, "Yes," and they'd say, "Oh, I've been there, but do you think you could bring us an eye doctor?" Or, "Do you think you could bring this social service?" And we began to see that there was much more need in that neighborhood than the needs we were filling at Wayne. And we thought we were doing a great job. We had healthcare, we had a pharmacy, but there was more to do. And so I talked to my board at ECAT at the time and said, I think we need to do a neighborhood plan for this neighborhood. Now, how we define that neighborhood, we'll talk about in a minute. But my board agreed at that time, and so under the auspice of ECAT, we went ahead and formed and did a neighborhood plan. We used Altair Consulting as a consultant to help us develop the plan. And the first thing we did was we really defined the area. So you can see on this slide here, what we think about as this area is really from 6th to 12th Street, East 6th to East 12th, from the Bayfront Connector to Pennsylvania Avenue. And we were thoughtful about that definition of the neighborhood. We wanted to be thoughtful about doing work in a neighborhood where we didn't see anyone else active, right? So we knew Best was doing their work. Obviously, our West Bayfront on the other side of town, Eastside Renaissance doing their work on Parade Street. But this felt to us to be a neighborhood where no one was really doing work. We went up to Pennsylvania Avenue because we felt that, Bishop Rock is doing his work at Eagles Nest right on Pennsylvania. Didn't want to step on those toes. Also felt that he was doing work over there that was great work. So this was kind of the area that we defined. In defining that area, we immediately then went out and found people from the neighborhood to work with us on this. So we formed a steering committee made up of residents and business owners from this defined area, and we met with them on a regular basis to talk about what their hopes and dreams were for this neighborhood, what it had been. I also want to give a huge shout out to Hannah, who did a great amount of historical work on that neighborhood, really looking back on what were the businesses that used to be here, what was this neighborhood like at one time, and so we had that historical basis in our mind as we went to work creating this neighborhood plan. So I'll stop there just quickly. Any questions on that? The founding? Okay. So on the next page there, you'll see the methodology. How did we go about this plan? So the first thing was we really wanted public engagement. This was not intended to be a top-down plan. We wanted to understand from those who had been there much longer than us what they needed. So we hosted 4 in-person events. We did those all at that ECAT Wayne building. We also went door to door. You can see in the picture there went door to door introducing ourselves to all the residents and all the business owners in that defined area, talked to them about what we were doing and inviting them to come to more and more of these events. We also did a property condition survey. We were very grateful to the city who provided us with their baseline data that they had done on property conditions. We have property conditions on every single building that is located, every single residence, I should say, located within this area. The city has not done a lot of commercial property surveys, and so that was something that we added on. Our members and volunteers surveyed over 400 parcels using some of that, the city's work, updating it ourselves, and making sure that we could at least know whether the buildings were in poor condition, fair condition, good condition, so that we would understand what was really needed. And then we took additional data collection. We used census information, other sources to really build a picture of the neighborhood. Did I miss anything so far, Yana? Just poke me if I do. Okay. So what we learned in the course of this really intensive data collection period, and I should add, we did that in, let's see, the fall of 22 was when we really did most of the data collection. So what we learned was that this neighborhood really has a wonderful and robust profile. So there's about 2,700 residents in the area, about 1,000 households. Some really interesting takeaways. This district, and by the way, we call it the Wayne Health and Wealth Equity District because that's really what we're seeking to do. We're seeking to bring health and wealth equity to this neighborhood because we think those are really the two most important things that really matter to folks in their daily lives. So what we learned about this district was this district is younger than the rest of the city. The demographics tend a little lower. What's interesting about that, it's ripe for youth development programs. Definitely something on our radar. We do some of that at ECAT, but this told us probably we needed more. It also, in the signaling of younger people, made us understand there's probably more of a need for workforce development. There's maybe more need for neighborhood development because the folks here are younger and those are the services that they need. The median household income is lower than the Erie County average by $20,000, so significantly lower than the rest of the county. And there is, as I think probably all of you would guess, there is a higher percentage of residents living in poverty in this neighborhood rather than the rest of Erie County. And again, I don't think any of us are surprised by that. And then there's just a little bit of a mix of the residential and the commercial properties, as I noted. You know, what's kind of interesting here, not really very many unsound residential properties, mostly there in that good, average, and poor. What we like about that is it lets us know this neighborhood is right on the cusp. With a little bit of investment and some sweat equity, we could be bringing back some of these properties into better condition. So then kind of what we found, and I'm not going to read this to you, and we have a whole plan that you can take with you today, and you can really read it at your leisure. But we really created 3 focus areas out of this work, out of this data. The first was we need to create pathways to whole homes. And when we talk about whole homes, what we really are talking about are homes that are in good condition, homes that are healthy. And I'll pause there for a second. And when I talk about healthy homes, and I know you all know this from your work with the city, but imagine a home that has a hole in its roof and there's water coming in, whether significantly or little by little, or bricks that aren't well pointed, and there's mold now in that house and you have a child with asthma. Imagine what that does to your daily life and your well-being. Or imagine that you have carpeting in your home that you can't pay to pull up or to replace, and you have a child with asthma. Or imagine that you have broken stairs on your front porch and that leads to falls, right? So there are these health aspects, and that's what we're thinking about when we say whole home. It's a home that makes a family whole and healthy. So we want to create a pathway to make sure that the homes of the residents in this neighborhood are whole and that they are healthy for the residents. Secondly, we want to think about inclusive and creative entrepreneurship. Because this demographic is younger, there's so much potential. These are young people who are hungry to own businesses, hungry for workforce development, and we want to make sure that we can provide opportunities for that. And then our last focus area for this plan is really to reimagine East Avenue. So when I think about the East Avenue of my youth, it does not look like what it looks like now. What can we do to reimagine that, and what can we do to bring kind of the basics of neighborhood development? Flowers and trees and a street on East Avenue. I'll tell you, we've gone to neighborhood watch meetings over that Father Jerry Proscaro holds on Hess Avenue, and what we hear from the neighbors is nuisance bars and cars drive too fast on East Avenue. I'm sure you guys hear this too. So what can we do? How can we work with the city to think about putting bike lanes in, perhaps, to narrow the street in some way, making sure that people aren't whipping around each other as children are walking across the street to East Middle School. So just creating the basics of a neighborhood. I'll also add here, excuse me, this is the neighborhood that leads itself to the foot of East Avenue and where the former Coke plant is, right? So I sit on the Port Authority board, thankfully nominated by the mayor, and I think all of you know the work that the Port Authority is now trying to do with the Coke plant. I went down to the foot of East Avenue on the 4th of July because I was interested, I didn't really want to drive all the way out to the beach, and I thought, well, this is close to my house. The people that are down there who are taking advantage of the lake, right, this is their beach in essence, is really fairly shocking, particularly when you know what we know about the ramifications of the pollution down there. So when I think about a neighborhood that extends down East Avenue, I think too about green spaces and opportunities for recreation. In our minds, it's all of that over there. It's that foot of East Avenue is not necessarily in our plan, but the residents we're working with, they access those spaces. And so it's really part and parcel of creating a robust, healthy neighborhood for everybody. And that is kind of the plan that we've put together. And you'll see some data points here. Again, we don't have to dwell on all of them. A couple things I'd point out under whole homes. 17% of residential parcels are in poor and unsound condition. That's something that we can address, right? That's something the city is working to address. We want to make sure neighbors in this neighborhood know about all the programs that you guys have approved and are trying to put into practice. Let's make sure folks can take advantage of those. Lots of demand for roof and window repair. That's not a big, surprise. I think under entrepreneurship and economic mobility, 25% of the people we surveyed said they didn't own a business, but they'd like to. To us, that says there's real interest and kind of an attitude about wanting to make life better for themselves and their families. And if we can help them do that, maybe by renovating commercial spaces so that there's a place for them to own a business someday, we think that that would be a valid use of this plan. And then again, a lot of concentration of poor and unsound conditions. So if you go to the next page, then okay, what do we do with that? We've done this great work, we've looked into the data, now what do we do? And I want to stop here and say during this period of time we had a bit of a shift, because while I was working at ECAT and while we found all this information, we really realized that ECAT was not an organization that could put this into action. ECAT is a nonprofit, it's a new nonprofit, it does youth arts and workforce development. It doesn't do neighborhood development. So at that moment, we really had a decision to make. And so I left the organization, left it in very good hands with the new executive director, and I came over to take a new position with the Hammett Health Foundation, where we knew we could have the resources to put this plan into action. So we formed, under that umbrella, a new community development corporation. It's called BUILD CDC, and it is the mission of BUILD to put this plan into action, in addition to some other work we're doing around homelessness that we can talk about another day. So when I have here findings and action, we have the plan. We've now formed this new community development corporation to put the plan into action, and we have some phase 1 projects. So first of all, we want to expand the campus at ECAT. The Wayne building is absolutely full, 80,000 square feet, every bit of it is used. We have no space. We have nonprofits coming to us asking for space. We have additional workforce programs we want to do, and we don't have space for it. So we're going to be expanding the campus next door. Wayne Park Baptist Church is next door to us. We're working with the church to acquire that property, deal with our parking situation, which is a little out of control, and have more space to do this work. So that's a phase 1 project for us. We're also actively looking to acquire property. We want to be acquiring property just like they do in the Sisters of St. Joseph neighborhood, our West Bayfront and Best, also what Eastside Renaissance is doing on Parade. We now are in a position with funding to acquire and renovate property that we can put back out for rent or for sale. And also in addition to that, in addition to residential property, we want to acquire commercial spaces, because as I noted, there is wonderful commercial space on East Avenue, and we know that people want to open businesses and don't have a place to do that. So if we can renovate commercial space and offer low rent to them, then that would be a place. Was there a question? Okay, sorry. Sometimes I can just go. And then, of course, facilitating that placemaking and belonging. So I have here an example of that. This Sunday, we'll have a health fair over at the Wayne Building. It's in cooperation with the city's 814 concert series. So this Sunday, it will be over at Wayne Park. We have a health fair across the street, fostering a sense of belonging, offering resources to people in the neighborhood that need it. Hannah is wonderful about running a weekly pay what you can farmers market. We've brought that to the neighborhood as well, an opportunity for folks to get some fresh produce. So these are just little things that we're starting with to really bring back a sense of belonging in that neighborhood. And I shouldn't say back, because actually those neighbors are very active. Mm-hmm. We just want to try to help bring them together, put a little glue, and honestly a little bit of investment. So I mentioned that we formed this Community Development Corporation, BUILD. These are kind of the 4 areas that we're working, definitely working in the healthcare space. We continue to offer at Wayne the primary health network clinic that's there. We're also bringing a neighborhood center to East Avenue in cooperation with UPMC Health Plan. There will be a food pantry on site and an opportunity for telehealth. That's for folks who maybe need to see a specialist but don't have a stable internet connection. They can come here in a telehealth pod and be able to have that telehealth opportunity. So that's all coming on East Avenue. I've mentioned we're working on the safe and affordable housing. We continue to work with ECAT on their workforce training. There's a very strong construction trades program happening there, and we're partnering with them to put those students to work on some of these neighborhood projects. And then again, the thriving neighborhoods, the campus expansion, the market that I just mentioned. And so really, that's the end of our presentation. The packet that you have, the second document, is a summary of our entire neighborhood plan. We don't need to go over it with all of you, but we wanted you to have a copy of it so that you can read it at your leisure before we bring it to you for approval. But I will stop there. First, I'll ask Hannah if I missed anything.
If you didn't, I would just maybe add that as we're looking at the findings in action, we are a neighborhood stakeholder, so we're adapting to the opportunities and the requests of the community. So some of the things that I just went over in our key initiatives, those are requests we've gotten from the community, and as we continue to do this development work, we're going to stay in tandem with those residents and those property owners and business owners to make sure that we're adapting this organic plan to their needs.
Yeah, and so that it grows, right? It's not a plan on a shelf. Mm-hmm. So what questions do you have for us about the work we're doing in this neighborhood, what you've heard today, why we're doing it, what we intend to do? What questions can we answer?
Do you ever sleep?
I do, sometimes.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah, come on, you guys are busy. You're all busy. When we want to do good work, right, we make the time.
I don't necessarily have a question. I just have a few comments. I know that we had a prior discussion a couple years back when this was originally being rolled out, and I had mentioned that, you know, don't forget that just because Mr. Bishop Rock is in that neighborhood, he might not be doing direct work with the neighbors outside of the children. And that's still something that I wholeheartedly feel. And just a couple blocks over, there's neighbors that are going to say, well, what about us? So I'm happy that there is going to be additional phasing in of a newer footprint that you guys mentioned over here.
There is opportunity for expansion. And you're right. And you know, Councilwoman, when we initially looked at the boundaries of this, I think you and I talked about it, we weren't going to go beyond 10th Street.
Right.
Like, we felt there's enough work to do. But then you start to walk around and you're like, well, what about these folks up here on 12th Street? What, you know, and so it really does become, where do you stop?
Right.
But you're absolutely right. There is certainly room to grow. Once we start to do this well, I think then we can spread from there.
And that just it'll make the narrative in the neighborhood that they care. Because when we went to our listening tour last month, it was like we feel forgotten. We feel like there's no investment, and that was on Holland. So, you know, there's certain neighborhoods and certain areas of our city that the residents genuinely do feel like they are left behind, and they don't know what they need to do to be important enough. So I love the efforts. I've gone and participated in many of the ECAT you know, information gatherings, and also just the community celebrations and the efforts to build the relationships there. So I'm really hopeful that the residents will, you know, be seeing what they are telling us right before their eyes. Because it's like I tell people, things don't happen overnight, but slowly, gradually, they will start improving.
And when we put together this plan, I was living on East 2nd Street. So even in our conversations around the boundaries, I was like, my neighborhood is being left out of this current phase of the plan, but I've always known that we are engaging all the residents, and we still go door to door in those neighborhoods up east of our district, and we let them know about all the events that we're having. You know, Love Your Block is very active in those neighborhoods, and we work in very strong partnership with them as well to get resources to them. So it's exactly that. It's like we also want to make sure they all feel included in this.
Right, and I just, to walk down East Ave, like I lived on 10th and Brandis up until recently, so the thought of all of the storefronts being redone, it'd just be a sight to see our city in that area, to like see the investments, so people can feel the hope that, okay, maybe it's worth me staying here and putting this energy into this project, because when I would walk through, I'd be like, well, maybe 20 years ago this was a really popping little street, but
It was.
you know, I wouldn't know, because all my life it's just been, you know, slow decay
Decline.
and deterioration. So to have the older neighborhoods see, you know, the older neighbors see the slow investment. Like I think of, you know, New York Lunch.
Yes.
They've been there for so long.
Yes.
And, you know, there's other people who have had businesses in that area that, you know, the Barber Center, you know, there's specific areas that I bet you they would love to take their individuals down to whatever the East Ave community development could be. So I'm happy that we have the Coke plant. I'm happy that slow investment is coming our way with all the money that we can find and leverage thanks to ARP. So I am happy that you brought this to us, and I don't know if any other council members have anything to ask, because I don't have questions. I love more information is appreciated, because then we don't have to ask anything else.
I'm glad you mentioned the Barber Center too. I mean, it's really important for us to say they've been working in that neighborhood way longer, you know, than we have, and that's something to really remember. And we've connected with them. You know, they do a wonderful youth arts show, and so our students from ECAT have gone down there to hang the show. And you're right, they're a wonderful anchor. We have some really strong anchor businesses and anchor organizations there. It's just about kind of bringing everybody together and making sure we're rowing in the same direction. But yes, we would be remiss if we didn't say they've been doing great work over there for a very long time.
Yes, I affirm everything, and I'm very excited about everything. I have roots there myself. The first 4 years of my life lived on 9th Street, and my husband just recently retired from 12th Street, McGinnis Road Rings, and every day on his lunch break, if it were nice weather, he would walk. There's like 3 different trails that he would walk, and it was always through the neighborhood, and I would join him on those walks, and we would say hi to certain people that were out on their porches and things like that. He knew people, talked with them. I mean, I would go to some of the neighborhood watch meetings. They're very well organized by Father Jerry, St. Anne's Mother of Sorrows. You know, they have daily mass there. The Sarah Reed's Children is invested in that community. And back in the 90s, there was a collectible store on 11th and East Avenue that I would go if I needed a gift, something special for someone. And I remember talking to the owner back in the day, and he said, oh, there's going to be investment. Well, you know, it's sort of like talked about it, came and went type of thing. It never really reached its fulfillment. So anything that you can do with that neighborhood. There is a lot to be said for people who are committed to be good neighbors. And the Love Your Block program, I had participated in with some cleanup there, and that was a decent time where, you know, we talked to the people walking around with us, picking up trash and stuff. So thank you. Thank you.
And I think it's worth you all noting, like, there's such a wonderful network of neighborhood organizations, and I know you know that, but what's really interesting about this moment in time, and really thanks to leadership, you know, from Renee and the mayor's office and others to really bring us together. And so we're working together, I think, in really good ways, and, you know, thinking about how we can be impacting our own little parts of the city, but doing that together to really, you know, leverage and make more impact, applying for grants together, coming to the city for conversations together. So I think you'll see more of that in the future, and I think that's really the way that we start to see change in our neighborhoods, is when we're all kind of patchworking it together. And so that's really exciting as well.
You know, people don't realize what a wonderful neighborhood that was. I spent 25 years of my life teaching at East High, and teachers, plural, lived in the area.
Yeah.
They lived on Pennsylvania Avenue, they lived in Atkins, because it was a family area.
Right.
It was a tremendous area.
Yes.
And the best kept secret in the world. Everybody said, you're teaching at East High? Yes, I am. Because they were great people.
Yeah, it is, and
Very
it's great people, and I think it's important to note it's still a strong. The residents there are very strong and very engaged. They just need a little help sometimes, and so I think if we can provide that, that's all the better.
Yeah, I believe you had mentioned once that the data that you had gathered showed that they're working twice as hard.
Absolutely,
neighborhood.
yes, yeah. I think what some of the data points, I think it's in the summary. One of them was that, the folks are younger, but we are seeing that they actually have a higher level of employment
Yeah.
than the rest of the city, which tells us these are hardworking people who really want better. And so,
Hardworking,
yeah, for sure.
who deserve to be invested in.
And
So I
deserve-
appreciate you doing all the legwork, because sometimes this takes a long time to gather the data we need to support the plans that we have, and this is gonna support any effort that you guys try to make in the future, so I
That's key
appreciate
for
that.
us, to go after
Yeah.
additional grants. You well know we do need your support, so we're grateful for your consideration and your time today.
Yes.
Okay? Great.
Anything
Good job,
comment?
Perez.
Everything good? Everyone's content? All right, we can be done.
Thank you.
Study session adjourned. I love